Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your host Thomas Irie from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this is going to be the Combat Series episode number 20. Of course, this episode is going to be coming out on all four of our platforms: our Instagram account, our Facebook account, our YouTube account, and our Apple Podcast account. So let's go ahead and dive into the first segment of the Combat Series this week. I'll be sharing my thoughts on Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. I'll be sharing my fight summary on the fight that took place in the main event at UFC 294. So we saw at UFC 294, Islam Makhachev successfully retained his lightweight championship in a rematch against Alexander Volkanovski in the main event of UFC 294, when Islam Makhachev successfully retained his title in dominating fashion, knocking out Alexander Volkanovski in the first round to retain his lightweight championship with a nasty leg kick that set up for the finish. Unexpected leg kick, a leg kick heard around the world that shocked the combat sports world, with Makhachev scoring a victory that fast in the first fight between two respective fighters that went the distance and went to the judges' scorecards. This time it was no need for that, when Islam Makhachev defeated Alexander Volkanovski in the first round with a devastating leg kick, which led to a KO victory. So with that being said, I am stunned that Islam Makhachev finished off Alexander Volkanovski the way he did at UFC 294 with that devastating leg kick that was set up for the knockout victory. And to do that, defeat Alexander Volkanovski, who is top 3 in terms of pound-for-pound fighters in the UFC, finishing him off in the first round within the first 3 minutes of the first round, to me is very impressive. It caught me off guard. And to me, right now, Islam Makhachev has to be pound-for-pound the best UFC fighter after that outstanding performance that he had at UFC 294 in his victory against Alexander Volkanovski, who is right now the reigning defending featherweight champion in the UFC. The way how you closed the door on Volkanovski, ending the rivalry the way you did within the first 3 minutes of 5 championship rounds, is impressive to me. And now Islam Makhachev extends his UFC winning streak to 13 straight UFC victories. That is now tied for the third most UFC victories in terms of winning. In terms of a winning streak, 13 straight victories for Islam Makhachev. He's pound for pound to me the best UFC fighter in the UFC, coming off that performance at UFC 294. So with that being said, yes, Islam Makhachev did successfully retain his lightweight championship, but I have to give Alexander Volkanovski his flowers. He has to deserve credit in this particular moment as well, even though he lost this fight. He saved him and Kamaru Usman, who I will get into later in the Combat Series. Alexander Volkanovski saved UFC 294 with the injury to Charles Oliveira. Unfortunately, him pulling out the fight under 2 weeks before the main event of UFC 294. Alexander Volkanovski picked up the phone call from Dana White and the UFC executives and accepted this fight on an 11-day notice. And I really did believe that Alexander Volkanovski did have a chance to win this rematch. If you guys remember last week on the Combat Series, if you guys have been following the podcast, I actually predicted that Alexander Volkanovski would win that fight in the rematch because of how highly anticipated the rematch was, and I thought Alexander Volkanovski would rewrite his wrong and walk away successful being a double champion in the UFC. But I did not expect Islam Makhachev to finish off Alexander Volkanovski the way he did. But man, Alexander Volkanovski is one warrior in the UFC, still pound for pound in my eyes, a top 3 fighter in the UFC today. Man, what a way to show that you are a warrior and would accept anything to become great in the UFC, no matter what the risk is. Hats off to Alexander Volkanovski. He deserves his flowers. So with that being said, what's next for Islam Makhachev? So Islam Makhachev is now on his way to becoming the greatest lightweight champion in UFC history, in terms of greatest lightweight champions of all time, with the likes of Khabib, with the likes of Charles Oliveira. Islam Makhachev is in that conversation for going down as the greatest lightweight champion in UFC history. So what's next for him? Could we see a fight that we were supposed to originally see at UFC 294 in the main event between himself and Charles Oliveira? I think that makes sense because obviously we would have got the fight last weekend between the two respective fighters. The Charles Olivier never got injured in sparring with that devastating cut above his eyebrow, which set up him to pull out of the main event of UFC 294. So when he's healthy, I do believe that we should get that fight in the beginning of the calendar year or springtime of 2024 in the UFC. I think that's the right call for Dana White and the UFC executives to make at this particular time in the lightweight championship picture. Or Islam Makhachev could potentially fight Justin Gaethje next, who is coming off an impressive KO victory against Dustin Poirier in the summer of in July of 2023. So, and it's actually interesting that earlier today I read that Justin Gaethje is willing to be very patient in getting a lightweight championship fight with Islam Makhachev. He's even said, and I don't think this is smart, but he's even said that he's willing to sit on the shelf for a year to wait for an opportunity to fight Islam Makhachev for a lightweight championship fight. Depending on what Islam Makhachev might do next, he might have to wait just a little bit longer to get a lightweight championship fight. So, but I wouldn't be mad if we got Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje next in the lightweight championship for a lightweight championship fight. There's a lot to look forward to in that division right now. So what's next for Alexander Volkanovski? I know he's hurting, and I know that he wanted that victory more than anything, but he's still in his next fight, he will go back down to his original weight class, the featherweight division, where he is the reigning defending featherweight champion. But I could still see him defending that featherweight title in the beginning of the calendar year 2024 in January. I could still see him fighting Lila Topuria in a featherweight championship fight in the beginning of 2024. And I do believe that he will finish his career in the featherweight division. This was really his last chance to become a double champion in his UFC career. He's already in his late 30s at age 35. And I think that him failing twice against Islam Makhachev, I don't see him getting another chance at the lightweight championship anytime soon. So I do believe that Alexander Volkanovski will go back to the featherweight division and defend his championship very well, like he's been doing for the last few years. And I do believe that he will be defending his title at least twice next year in the calendar year 2024. But that is my fight summary on the fight that took place this weekend at UFC 294 between Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski.